Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh Day School of Long Island, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City.
Having trouble with the
In the
lighting. Here
middle of
we
the
go.
dark there. Today we are recording
That's better.
523, day 523 of the captivity of the hostages. Um, we've started out remembering them and thinking about them and praying for them. Uh, this is what's important to us. This is really important to us. I don't think we can all go forward until they're all free. We know that many of them are no longer alive, but 24, 29 are believed to be alive, and we pray that they can come home safely. The scenes of reunion of the hostages who've come home are just so deeply emotional. We pray that these families can go through that, and we are sharing that as we approach Purim this Thursday evening and also Friday. An interesting way that the calendar ordains the holiday for us. So we're going to devote some of this to Purim and some to the Parsha. We'll start with the Parsha Ki Tissa, which is an amazing Parsha, of course. As far as the Parshiot of Shemot are concerned, and maybe even the Torah, in this Parsha you have, you know, arguably one of the most dramatic moments, even you could say the most dramatic moment in the entire Torah, Moses smashing the tablets. And that's what I want to focus on with you, not the smashing of the tablets, although we'll get to that, but I just want to talk about the tablets. I've been thinking about this because the tablets are such a visual image. There's such an evocative, iconic image for us. I've said this many times on this podcast. I, I don't think they look in any way the way we depict them in shul. I think they're probably no bigger than a tablet, maybe even smaller than a floor tile. I don't think that Moses walked around with 80-pound, or 200-pound slabs of rock, the way that they may be depicted. Um, and whether or not they were rock or clay or whatever, I mean, they're part of the culture of the ancient world. And interestingly enough, and Barry, I'm going to turn to you for this first because we were discussing this in our pre-discussion. There are various media for the writing of text in the ancient world, and they emerge out of different cultures, or at least they're dominant in certain cultures. So you can talk about Egypt and talk about Babylonia, and you can talk about the writing culture. So why don't you just explore that for us for a second?
So in Egypt, the main medium for writing is papyrus. And Egypt happens to be a very dry country, so paper, as we learned from the discovery of the Cairo Geniza, lasts forever. And so in Egypt, they would write on paper. In Babylonia, they used clay tablets. Cuneiform was originally etchings into clay, which were then baked, and those too also survived for thousands of years. But it seems that in Eretz Israel, they would write on cloth, on parchment, right? When the Mishnah discusses the laws of writing, the laws of Shabbat, the first one in the sequence of writing is to hunt a deer because the deer skin was used as parchment, and it culminates with the act of writing and then erasing two letters. So it raises the question, why Dafka does the Torah talk about two stone tablets as the Luchot when it might have used another medium? Now, granted, they're on a mountain, so I get that, and they have just left Egypt, but that would then make one think that paper might have been used instead.
So the thing about paper is, even in Egypt, it is flammable. you know, uh, Things do go up and inflame.
Yes.
Okay, and rats and other animals can chew on paper and parchment, and that was known already from Mishnaic or even prior pre-Mishnaic times. They knew that these things were edible. The stone is a durable thing, and of course, if you're an animal, you're going to break your teeth if you try to eat the stone. But stone obviously suggests permanence, and we have that cultural use of stone to this day as we monumentalize people and
I
objects,
mean, this is
times.
etched in stone.
It's etched in stone.
That's our common parlance to say something is set in stone or etched in stone.
The Luchot, though, play such an important role. I'm drawn to this, as we read, every year we read. So I have this experience where I kind of feel like a magnet pulling me to different texts. And I don't know why it's pulling me to the Luchot, only except for the fact that they're broken and they are broken in the most dramatic way possible, which we'll get to. But they make their first appearance way back at the end of Mishpatim, when God, after having given the Ten Commandments orally and having given the whole covenant code, that's all of Mishpatim, 21, 22, 23, uh, lots and lots of laws, says, Ale Elai Hahara, come up to me on the mountain. Hey Yesham, be with me there. Love that verse. Just hang out with me. I'm going to give you the tablets of stone. So I think the text assumes that we know what they are already because it doesn't describe what they are. I'm going to give you the tablets, not I'm going to give you tablets. I'm going to give you tablets. I'm going to give you things. And I think what's happening is, the word that has gone from God to Moses is as tangible as it can be. I hear it, I see it. They have this synesthesia in the experience of the word. It affects all of their senses except for the sense of touch. You can't touch the word. It has no physical. It has no physical characteristic. And so I want to say that the luchot are a way of literally concretizing what is abstract. I want to take it, I want to take what is in air and I want to condense it into stone, into the hardest thing possible. And that I want you to carry with you. And so then, okay, so we come to this parsha, we come to our parsha where God then, if you look at chapter 31, verse 18, it's kind of like at the end of all of the instructions about the tabernacle and everything else. This week we have the incense altar and all sorts of things. Little verse 18, Vayiten el Moshe kechalato ledaber ito. God gives to Moses, when he finishes speaking to him at Mount Sinai, Shnei Luchot HaIdut, two tablets of the pact. Luchot Even, stone tablets, K'tuvim Be'etzbei Elohim. So we get a bit of an elaboration on what they are, and all of a sudden, I mean, the text is drawing our attention to them, saying this is testimony, this represents something, so already we're in the symbolic realm. It's written Be'etzbei Elohim. Uh, what does that mean? God's own finger, the finger of God. So already, we have to kind of close our eyes, imagine, and you can't imagine it's, laser, it's like, it's this immense power. We're stepping off of, our realm of imagination. We don't know what this means, okay? And then we have the violation of the covenant. We would spend a lot of time thinking about the golden calf and the worship of the golden calf, but turn to the moment where Moses is told about this, and uh, it's chapter 32, verse 15. And so, Vayifen, Vayired Moshe Minahar. Moses sees everything, hears everything. He's told God, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He turns down Ushnei Luchot Haidut biyado, and the two tablets of testimony are in his hand. Luchot Ktuvim Mishnei Avrehem, the tablets written on both sides. Again, what does this mean? Mizeh Mizehim Ktuvim, this side and that side, they're written, front and back. Luchot Maseh Elohim, and they are the work of God. Michtav Elohim, and the writing is the writing of God. Charut ala luchot, incised on the tablets. Lots to say about that. And then skip down where he sees this. Kol milchama b'machaneh. Verse 19, Vayi kasher karav el hamachaneh. He comes close to the camp. He sees the egel, the calf, the dancing. Vayichar, he gets angry. Vayashlech miyadav et haluchot. He throws them down. Vayishaber otam tachat ahar. Jeremy, did he do something wrong here? He broke the
Well,
tablets. Who gave him permission?
you gave permission. So I can read it in two ways. First of all, kind of famously, um, there's a famous wordplay here in the beginning of chapter 34. Um, God says to Moses, I want you to carve out two tablets like the first ones. And I will write on these new tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. The rabbinic tradition contains a couple of opposite ways to think about that. One very famous is Asher Shibarta, a little word play in the name of Reish Lakish in the Talmud, says Asher Shibarta, Yishar Kochecha Shibarta. Well done.
Way to go.
Yishkoyach. Well done. The people didn't deserve it, or the people, they hadn't earned it. We gave you a divine message, and 40 days later, you have already perverted it. And there's those tablets in their pristineness and their perfection sort of can't exist in the world where the Israelites worship the golden calf. Maybe the most eloquent rendering of that comes from an early 20th century rabbi, Meir Simcha of Dvinsk in Lithuania, whose Bible commentary is called the Meshech Chochmah. He's well known as the Or Sameach, and if any of our many listeners have experienced that kind of a Haredi, what's the word, outreach, kiruv yeshiva called Or Sameach, it's named for him, and he said that Moses realized when he saw them worshiping the golden calf, he knew that they could make an idol out of anything, and broke the tablets so that they not make an idol out of God's gift of the Torah, which is like a brilliant, so poetic and so brilliant. That's to my way of thinking the most vivid illustration of Moses did the right thing. But on the other side, and I tilt more to this position generally. If I have to pick, I tilt more to the other side. The thought of Psol Lecha, Moses, hew two tablets, is I hewed the first ones, and you didn't take very good care of them, and so now what I need, and maybe this is even like a little bit of Yasher Koach Sheshibarta, well done breaking them, but what I need is something that's a little bit more cooperative. I need you to do some work, and I will also do some work, and the Torah that we will have between us will be a little bit more. You'll care for it a little bit more. To me, the best piece of evidence that the Torah thinks that Moses did a bad thing as opposed to a good thing is that when Moses and Aaron are ultimately punished in the book of Numbers and told that they can't enter the promised land, we all read in that passage in Parshat Hukat, it's the hitting the rock and the water's supposed to come out, and he hits the rock twice, and God said, "Speak to the rock," but you hit the rock, and Aaron does absolutely nothing in that story. And besides, Moses has been told back in Exodus that he is supposed to hit the rock. So it just seems like it's very hard to understand how Moses gets such a hard punishment, and Aaron, who has done literally nothing in that story, also gets a harsh punishment. And my real reading is that the Torah there is trying to kind of soften the blow and not embarrass and not put their failings right out there, that Moses is punished for hitting a different kind of rock, the tablets, and Aaron is punished for having made the golden calf. And that, I think, sort of captures a number of features of the passage. I think that Moses, at Moses's hands, the God-given Torah is in pieces, and that can't be good.
It suggests to me that what remains the second set is always going to be a replica, and that you're never going to be able to go back to the first set. And there's always something off about a replica. I had this experience, I think I mentioned before, going to the Anu Museum, beautiful museum in Tel Aviv, wonderful museum in Tel Aviv, right? And so you go to all the display cases and you see a replica of the Rothschild miscellany, a replica of these beautiful
Mhm.
illuminated manuscripts, a replica of this, a replica of that. And you go like, come on, if I wanted to see a replica, I'd just go to the library or, go online and see a picture of it, right? Imagine. So you go to, the museum in which the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, right? Independence Hall in the United States, right? Where's the
They're in Washington.
in Washington?
I
Okay.
think there might be one in Philly too, though, because
All right.
there were several original Declaration of Independence, but
Okay. So
In case the first one didn't work, they had a backup.
right. Okay. So if you're going and you're paying good money to go see the Declaration of Independence and you see in replica, you go like, come on. And this is not what I signed up for. Even when you go to the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, some of the texts there are not the original. Some are, of course, and good for that, but some aren't. And the reason is because the originals are too fragile to put there, and you just have a different interaction with a replica, and means that the original is never going to be there, just the fragments of that. And that, I think, has a profound influence on our imagination in ways that we could talk about in a second. That um, but but the relationship was broken, and you'll never ever be able to restore it to its primary setting. You can heal it, you can work at it, you can make it good. You can make it really good, but it it's always going to have a residue. There's always going to be a scar there. And I think we carry that scar. That, if Moses didn't break the tablets, we would be in a state of the pristine, right? But the fact is Moses broke the tablets, and God is upset about it, but I don't think it's like God is stuck too with us in this relationship. I think that there's a profound pathos is what I'm getting at. The profound pathos of this moment is it's never going to be the way it was supposed to, and that's life. That is life. We
How
all
reassuring.
no, it's reassuring because it tells us you are going to aspire, but it's never going to be accessible to you, and accept that. You accept that. Are you going to live forever? Are you going to be healthy forever?
So I think we need to unpack a little more the symbolism here. So we have our tablets, which, according to the rabbis at least, are both sets are put into the ark and disappear from sight, right? They're never seen again, and they're never used again until they disappear from history with the destruction of the temple,
Right.
the first temple.
They perform no
So,
liturgical function.
so what do they actually signify if you go through your life without ever seeing what is called the tablets of testimony or of witness or of the pact? Why do we need them at all?
You have an
And truth is, we've gone 2,500 years without them, so maybe we don't need them.
We need them in our imagination, and we need to imagine a box that contains them, and that box and what it contains influences our life. But we don't organize our religion around them. We may have made the foundation of the covenant around them, but religious life revolves around other important texts, namely the Shema. We recite the Shema, devotedly, religiously, twice a day at least. We keep it on our doorposts. We wear it on our arm. We have that as the text that is to stick to us, to make us, loyal to the ultimate degree to God. That's what our religion is focused on. That if we wrote the Ten Commandments in our mezuzot and bound them on our tefillin, we'd be different kind of we I don't know what kind of discussion we've been having today.
It's really interesting why, the disappearance from the Ten Commandments from Jewish liturgy is an interesting question. I want to just register as we said before we started recording. I appreciate that the description of Jewish ritual in the Torah itself does not record that they took the tablets out and read them, but I'm finding it, as I said before we started recording, it doesn't comport with almost anything I know about, the biblical description of Moses or other teachers reading the canonical text. Kitov zot zikaron basefer. Remember, write this memorial down in a book, and the king has to write a book, and write down this poem of Ha'azinu, and
Put it in there.
they are reading books, and that is a way of conveying the religious teaching to the people. Moses reads from a book of the covenant or a little bit earlier in Exodus in chapter 24. I appreciate that it's a little bit missing from our Bible text. So that's a bit of a weak point of my argument here, but you think that they didn't even eat the Korban Pesach, so I'm not.
Well,
I'm not
so
out
I'm
there
going to
to
say
know
that for next month.
I just want to put a postcard. We're running. I want to say, I have we have a collection of fragments of Torah scrolls from various synagogues in Europe that we keep in our ark, and they're fragments. They're big enough that we you can hold them, and twice a year we actually make use of them as relics, and it's controversial in my head in the sense that you know during Simchas Torah I'll hold out these fragments, and survivors and families. Sadly, there aren't too many survivors left, but we used to have many survivors walking around for the sixth hakafa. We chose that hakafa, holding these relics, as a connection to the past. And on Yom HaShoah, we'll empty out the ark and leave those scrolls in there as a kind of remembrance. And there is something to be said for a relic, except for the fact that it makes us sad. And I think that any exposure to a relic of the broken tablets would make us terribly, terribly sad. I'm fine with the fact that the box was never opened, and that it exists in the imagination, as a and
I'm going to go
become
in a different direction. That it's not that they exist in the imagination; they exist in our memory, and
okay.
the memory is what carries us through. And we were talking a little bit before about the difference between the Ten Commandments and the Shema. The Shema makes no reference, at least the first two paragraphs, to the Exodus, right? As Jeremy said, it's about love. It's about a relationship between us and God that has some kind of equality within it. Although obviously we're human beings and we're not God, but just like there's a kind of equality, I think one can make the case for between the love of a parent for a child and the child for the parent, even though we know that they exist in two different realms. But the Ten Commandments is about the Exodus and about the law that comes from the Exodus. And maybe what we need to remember is that at the core is love, and the responsibilities flow from that love and not the other way around.
Maybe as
That's quite lovely in and of itself, and it is true. Our listeners may know that the earliest descriptions in rabbinic literature of liturgy, back in what apparently is something that stretches back into pre-rabbinic times, back into temple times. The claim is that they did recite the Ten Commandments every day, and the Talmud will later say that because of the heresies of because of the perversions of the heretics, they stopped doing that. Presumably, that means something like Jewish Christians saying that the Ten Commandments are really part of the Bible and the rest of the stuff is less important, or something of that nature. And it is just true that the religion that we have, the Shema Yisrael, the way that is ingrained in us, we recite it every day. Even people who are not terribly observant know Shema Yisrael. Even people who are not terribly observant want to die with Shema Yisrael on their lips. That shapes a certain kind of approach to this religion that it would be different if that function were filled by the Ten Commandments. Now, maybe it's also just a little practical because anybody can remember Shema Yisrael, and the Ten Commandments are a little bit long, um, and but I I do feel like the Ten Commandments concretizes, as we've been talking about, in the stone, set in stone, etched in stone, are very much at the center. And in fact, they're at the center of the Mishkan. The first thing that is described and the last thing that is brought in to the Mishkan is the Aron, which will hold the tablets. It is really important. It is perhaps sad to think of opening it up and seeing the broken fragments there, the tattered relic, but it's really deep, really, really deep to see the whole WHOLE, the whole version and the relic of the broken version. Man, and so I'm going with, even though it doesn't exactly say it, I'm going with they did open it and read it because that's
Nice. Okay.
So just
Right.
one more thing to add. So you were talking, Jeremy, and I'm reminded what the Ark with the Ten Commandments remind me of is the spice box we use on Havdalah. Most of us use a spice box that is pretty. Hidur mitzvah, we want to beautify the mitzvah, but the spices themselves don't look that great. But the smell is what we take away from the spice box. It's not the visual. The Ark itself is a beautiful work of art, and what it contains is, a couple of rocks. But the message that comes from that box is what's so important, not the object itself. But we dress the object with beauty so that we can take the message out of it.
I want to go with the last word here on this, which is that the luchot and the shurei haluchot, the full and the broken pieces of the tablets, end up representing the mind in rabbinic imagination, and it's not a far step here. They say that a person who's forgotten his Torah is like the person who has fragments of the rod, because the proof text that you need to revere them is that both the whole tablets and the fragments of the tablets were in the ark. A very, very profound image. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this is what the tablets represent. The tablets do represent the mind. After all, God wants to incise something on the mind, and the for the Aron to represent something, it represents, for better or worse, the heart or the mind. The lev is the mind of antiquity. So maybe it is representing. Maybe what's in the mind is the software. The thing that, well, it's hardware. I mean, but it's the inside.
brain's the hardware, the brain's the hardware, the consciousness is the
Exactly.
software.
Okay. Well, we don't have a lot of time to talk about the Megillah, but I did want to focus on this one verse right at the end of chapter 8. And we were in previous years, 5 years. We have been doing this. We rolled the dice. We had some fun. We talked. We're not going to talk about how complicated Purim is. I just want to talk about a verse. Okay. It says, chapter 8, verse 17, after the famous verse, I love it, the famous verse, La Yehudim Torah v'simchat v'son v'ikar.
So that's talking about Havdalah again.
Okay. Uvechol medina medina, in every province, uvechol year by year, in every city, mekom asher dvar hamelech v'ladam hagia, everywhere where the king's rules reached. Simcha v'sason leYehudim, gladness, joy. Mishteh v'yom tov, lots and lots of laughter, drinking, feasting. V'rabim me'amaretz mit yahadim, lots of people in the land, they just become, they Jew up. They mit yahadim, they make themselves Jewish.
Like Mujahideen, they become Osama bin Laden? No,
They
not
mit yahadim, they
Mujahideen.
they
Okay.
Jewify. Okay, reactions, comments, laughter, joy.
Laughter.
What does it mean to Jewify? Any-
Well, um, I would say that I think that broadly speaking, and broad is a good word here because there's a broad comedy and slapstick quality to a lot of the Megillah. There's some serious stuff too, but there's a lot of humor and very overt humor. I think that the Megillah is in many ways like the story of the fantasy of the Jews in the diaspora, weak at the mercy of much more powerful rulers. They are in fact exactly what Haman says that they are. There's this people scattered throughout all your lands. They've got different ways. They're not really integrated, or at various times, of course, in real history, more and less. But the reality is that we got a lot of Esther's and Mordecai's who have to hide their identity or have a lot of enemies and lots of Hamans throughout our history. And the fantasy has a lot of components, but it concludes with the item that is the most unpopular for American Jews today, especially in the war, that we killed all our enemies. We had to kill them all kind of attitude. We killed 75,000 people, which I'm quite sure in the entire history of the Jewish people, nobody ever took seriously enough to feel moral qualms about because it was utterly impossible. And nowadays it's situated in a different set of facts. But the other part that is just the fantasy of the weak and powerless people is that we were so mighty that other people wanted to join up with us. And I think this line is supposed to be funny as hell. Like,
So I love debating this with you because I do agree with you, and I'm I from year to year I'm of two minds: take it seriously or take it as farce. But here I'll at the risk of being provocative, say nothing works better than victory, and nothing works better than the demonstration of power to end your enemy's obsession with us. Okay, and here's the controversial statement, which is the war that is going on has to end with victory. Uh, Otherwise, and as difficult as that is to attain, anti-Semitism will persist, right? And ki nafal pachad hayudim. They're afraid, and so because of the fear, they align. It's not the best motivation for them to align with us, but it says, just stop this, stop the hatred, stop. There's power here, and there's real repercussions for your hatred, and there's one way to fix this, which is join us.
So I think one might be able to read it in other ways than your learned expositions.
Uh,
And it seems to me it's at least possible from other Hebrew words in the Hitta'el that hey doesn't mean that they became Jews, but they became like Jews. And I think the key here is the pachad, the fear. Throughout the Megillah, up until chapter 8, let's say, the Jews are an object of scorn and derision. In chapter 8, their wrath has been unleashed, and they do a lot of damage to the Persians. And because now the Persians are afraid, they start to act like Jews. They're not really part of us. They just don't want to be beaten up like they're Persians, so they're going to pretend they're us.
yeah, because I mean, I think there is some serious stuff in the Megillah. I think the real contending with the precarious position of Jews in Persia, is a kind of paradigm for what lots of Jews have experienced through history in the diaspora. I think, some other thing that our members and our listeners might want to listen for as they read the Megillah is to hear that to hear that you know, uh, Mordecai is associated. You might not know this if you're just reading along, but it's true. Mordecai is associated with Saul, and Saul's downfall was not killing King Agag. Well, now Saul's descendant gets vengeance on Agag's descendant, and that's a bit of a polemic against King David because there's King David has displaced Saul, and So like the Book of Esther seems to be a kind of a Saulite, claim back for their ancestor. And those things I think are to be taken seriously. But in the main, I think that this is just such a comic book, not a comic book, such a comedic
But
book with so many funny elements, that I am going to tilt generally towards a comedic reading, like the very fact that the King Achashverosh in in the month of Nisan, and this clearly happens. There's another maybe serious part that Esther is fasting on the night of the Seder. It's like the liberation that's associated with Passover is inverted here in this terrible situation. But in Nisan is when Esther makes her plea to Achashverosh, and he agrees to kill Haman and save the Jews, and she says, "Well, rip up the decree." She says, "I can't rip up the decree," but in Adar, which is like a year later, so much could have happened better in a year later. But instead, he says, "Tell you what I'll do. I will let you a year later defend yourself." And this is I find this very comic to think that the king, who is so mighty and so powerful that he can't withdraw his own decree, so what he does instead is he just sicks the two parties at each other and tells them to fight it out. Like
it's
you,
amazing.
you couldn't have made a little peace there. You couldn't have figured out, how not to create this terrible clash. But instead, that's what Ahasuerus does. He says, "Tell you what I'll do. I'll let you fight back," and they end up fighting back in this. Well, if it was a movie, it would be Lord of the Rings and the orcs against the elves, and it would just be a huge fantasy. And so that's the reading I'm going to be inclined to.
Got it. Okay. Well, we're going to leave it there, and we're going to tilt towards joy because we need it. We need to be anchored with joy. We need a little bit of farce. We need a little bit of the ability to look at all of what we are experiencing, what we're witnessing on a daily basis, and to kind of step away from it and see, a different side of it, maybe laugh. And I think that's going to be very healthy for us. Laughter is really um, necessary for the religious spirit. We wish everyone then a joyous Purim, filled with laughter, filled with joy, notwithstanding challenging times. Take the time to rejoice. Take the time to have fun and laugh. Dress up. Drink a little bit, not too much. Eat a little bit, not too much. Uh, have some hamantashen, and have a beautiful, beautiful Purim and a beautiful Shabbos. And for all of us, Shabbat Shalom. See you
Shabbat shalom.
for the next
Amen.
of Parsha Talk. Bye bye.